It's extremely alarming to see so many millions of people extremely worried about heating and eating. So Liberal Democrats have argued, first of all, the government shouldn't have cut the universal credit uplift. They should have been more generous. They also shouldn't be going ahead with this increase in a tax on jobs, which is going to leave both employees and employers worse off. And they should be actually addressing this energy price crisis. I have argued that there should be a Robin Hood tax, a windfall tax on the super profits of the gas companies who are just making out with the global gas prices going up. And that money, some of that money should go to the more vulnerable in society. I've argued that the pensioner winter fuel allowance should be doubled, and something called the warm home discount, which helps people taking money directly off their bills, that should be doubled and many more people should get it. So we've got some practical measures that the Liberal Democrats have put forward, but the government just seems in total inertia, completely incapable of taking any leadership.
But I mean, there are proposals also that have been put forward by Labour. I mean, certainly a windfall tax on oil and gas. Some saying that could lead to less investment, in oil and gas, which then, of course, would lead to higher prices. So not necessarily solving the problem. And then on the warm homes discount, the issue there could be this is already an industry-managed scheme that's in place. Normally the way it works would be that those who can afford, or well, in the old days could afford, would pick up the bill for the poorest households. But the problem is, what we're going to see is the squeezed middle suddenly having more put on their bills in order to double the warm homes discount for those who can't afford. And you're suddenly seeing a squeezed middle that are no longer a squeezed middle, they're falling down and down the pecking order. It feels like we need something far more systemic to try and deal with the cost of living crisis than these sorts of measures that have been put forward. I mean, are there any other creative measures that any party is coming up with at the moment?
Well, first of all, I've got to disagree with you quite strongly about your characterisation of what we think is a really ambitious policy to help people who are struggling. The warm home discount, you're right, is currently coming off the bills and in terms of other bill payers paying for it. Under our proposals, that money would have to be paid for by the taxpayer. So you'd actually reduce everybody's bills because this cost that's currently paid through bills, which you're quite right, would come off and onto the taxpayer, funded by this Robin Hood tax. And you said earlier that it would be difficult for gas companies because they'd curb investment. Simply not true. Windfall taxes, by their very nature, don't impact investment plans. These super profits that the gas companies are making because of this unexpected rise in gas prices will not impact their investment at all. They're just, as the Chief Executive BP said, they're acting like a cash machine. That's unfair. It's unfair that these gas companies are making such profits when people are having to choose between heating and eating. So I say again, the Liberal Democrat proposal, which was actually significantly before Labour, but I'll let that by, and please, Labour are now saying the same thing. The opposition party is saying the same thing to government. We have some real proposals here, funded proposals, to really help those people who will be struggling. Should more be done? Absolutely. They shouldn't be going ahead with this unfair rise in this jobs tax they're proposing. There are other things that can be done. But I think, first of all, the government should adopt Liberal Democrat policy, which is really radical and will make a big difference quickly.
All right. Well, I want to get you on to what we originally asked you to talk about today, which is the parties in Downing Street, the potential delay again to the Sue Gray report whilst we wait for the Metropolitan Police to do their investigation. On Twitter, you've called it a stitch-up between the Met leadership and Number 10. What do you mean by that?
Well, let's be clear. I have nothing but respect for the rank-and-file police officers who put their lives in danger every day to keep us safe. And that's why I'm worried about any growing perception of a stitch-up. It's pretty dangerous. And let's look what's happened. The Met originally said they would not retrospectively investigate these issues. They said they wouldn't do it. Then they said they might, but they would read the Sue Gray report after it had been published. Then they changed for a third time and said they would investigate, but Sue Gray should publish in full first. And then they changed their minds again at the last minute and said and therefore we now have this long delay before the Sue Gray report is published. It's an utter fiasco, and it's got to stop. And that's why Liberal Democrats are going to call this out. Number 10 has behaved appallingly. We all know that. And these delays just make it seem a lot worse.
But when you say stitch up between Met leadership and Number 10, are you suggesting there's some sort of collusion between the two?
Listen, I think people are just losing confidence because this has been badly handled. I wrote to the Met Commissioner, Cressida Dick, weeks ago, calling on the Met Police to investigate. If they had done that when I first called for it, the investigation would have been finished and we could have moved on with the results of, in fact, both investigations. That's why I think, it's right for opposition parties to really question what is going on. The whole of the government is in chaos at the moment. It can't make decisions about the cost of living. We're just talking about the cost of living. The government coming forward with no package to help people because they're too busy worrying about their own skins because this has been so badly handled.
So Ed, I want to ask you, I wonder, because I know, I know from reading what you've said that your priority is to get Boris Johnson out. You'd like him to resign. You've been wanting him to resign for a while. If that is your aim, what would be so bad about waiting until the Met concludes its report to go alongside the Sue Gray report? Potentially that could be more damaging for the Prime Minister. Or are you concerned that the Metropolitan Police report is going to exonerate the Prime Minister?
I think that's highly unlikely. I think really the issue is these delays in reports being published when we know they've been completed for several days is worrying people. If the Met Police had got on with the job when I asked them to, we would already have the report. And I think it's those delays that are beginning to sound alarm bells across Westminster and Whitehall and the whole country, frankly. And I'm not the only one who is expressing alarm at the delays. Don't get me wrong, having called for the Met Police to investigate, I welcome the fact that they are investigating, but I'm worried that we were told that the Sue Gray report could be published and it wouldn't interfere with the investigation. Now people have changed their minds all of a sudden. You can understand why people might be getting a little bit worried.